Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Leapwing Audio Talks today with dear friend George Massenburg. For those who don't know George, which I guess are very few of you, George is a Grammy and Tech Award winner, producer, recording engineer, designer of audio equipment who has participated. It's like the seventh one by total, and he has won Grammy as both as a producer, as an engineer, and in 1988 was awarded with a Grammy for technical achievement for a lifetime of contributions to the art of science and recording. Massenburg discography includes 7 Little Feat albums, 7 Earth, Wind and Fire albums, 13 Linda Ronstadt albums, Journey, James Taylor, Jennifer Warnes, Herbie Hancock, Rick Stax, and tons of others. As well, he is the mainstay of the recording process, the parametric equalizer, and a great guy to be with in the studio. So, with no further ado, thank you, George, for being with us, and thank you for taking the time. How are you doing?
I'm great, and it's great to be here, and I'm really looking forward to talking. And it's always great when we're together in the studio, Emiliano. This is the first time we've had a virtual meeting, so I'm looking for it to be as gratifying as when we work in the studio together.
I'll try. I'm not sure how that will come, but that's already tons of fun. So here's the plan for today. We're gonna talk for about an hour, and we're gonna. Do you hear us? Do you hear me, George?
I do. I hear you very well. Thank you.
I hope everyone is hearing as well. So if you have any questions of like this is not sounding well, just let us know. Basically, the plan is to first, I would love to start with some questions from the audience to George.
That'd be great.
Briefly, then we will talk about the concept of critical listening with George, with referencing to an article that it's published on the web. Let me post your link to this article right now for you all to check it out. And then we're gonna move to talk about George's latest EQ plugin called MDW EQ6AX for Pro Tools, and I think that will take a good hour. So let's jump right on it.
Great.
If I see it's Karen in the comments. I don't see any questions as of yet. So let's start with critical listening, and then we'll fill it out. What do you think?
Okay, I want to start here, if I may.
Of course.
That really good music making, recorded music making, has more to do with how you listen than what you do. It's entertaining for me to hear questions about what plugins I use or what I do, and I go back to what my friend Al Schmidt generally says in answer to such questions is, I don't know what I do. I turn knobs till it sounds right. And basically, that's what I would advise our audience to do. Turn knobs till it sounds right. But that suggests that you're listening, and that you're listening immersed in the sound. And I'll talk more about immersive playbacks in a minute, which is Atmos and RO3D. But when I say immersed, I mean you're completely, for critical listening purposes, you're immersed in listening. You're really focused on listening. You don't have the phone ringing. Your rent is not due. The baby's not crying. That you really give it listening your full attention. And as Emiliano reminded me, you're gonna want to think about listening on 3 levels. You want to think about listening from your head, thinking about it, thinking about what you're hearing. You want to listen from your guts. Dance music is about guts. It's about how it hits you. And listen from your heart. Love songs are all about heart, for instance. And this idea of being able to deconstruct sound and to understand what's meaningful in what you're hearing in music goes very deep. It can mean everything that you know, the culture of the music that you're working with, from hip hop to mariachi to rock and roll. Knowing that culture has everything to do with getting it right and being able to touch someone's heart and soul. That's what we're in the business of, is touching. We want to touch people. We want people to feel this in their guts. So let's start there. And so I'm hoping to get questions from our audience and to get an idea of what you guys want to talk about, whether you want to talk about technology or.
Says Alan Meyerson, says, hi, George.
Hi, Alan.
He's hanging out with us. There is a question from, maybe Robin can highlight that question, from Juan Carlos Sotelo. Says, have you read about Theodor Adorno's theory on listening modes? I have not, but have you, George? Do you know about it?
I have not, and I'm pretty up to date on it. So I'm going to look that up on the net, and I'll have an answer for you as soon as I read it. No, where is Theodor Adorno from?
I guess Italy. I don't know. Like he hasn't.
I'm going to look it up.
Do for
I'm going to look it
like on touching on what you said about feeling the music. I especially want to hear your thoughts on how to develop critical listening when you are coming up, when you are a student, when you're a inexperienced engineer, producer, musician. Because I think, especially in my experience when I've been teaching other fellow students, that seems to be this way of thinking that either you are artistic and you don't care about the technology, or you are very technologist and you don't care about the art. But for me, what you talk about, critical listening, and what you represent, that basically technology is the tool in order to achieve a feeling. How do you see students understanding critical listening? How can you develop more or how can you get more in touch with yourself in order to be able to translate those feelings into technical words, if that makes sense?
That makes complete sense, and I wish I could have a quick answer for you.
We have all the time in the world.
I don't have a quick answer. But okay. Listening is best covered in the document. You know what? I'm going to open that document that I sent you, because
we could explore a bit and expand a bit on that document.
Because I think, and you know what? Maybe I'll share a screen. Let me see if I share a screen, if we can. Robin, you'll let me know if this works. It might not work. Let's see if this works. Let's share this screen. And I'm going to go here. Do you guys see that?
Yes, we are seeing your screen. Yes, right now we are seeing your screen. Yeah.
And I could maybe make it bigger. Not that. Actually, if you can see that, the idea with critical listening is that it's a skill. It's a skill. And it's the interpretation in the brain. Critical listening happens on a conscious level. It involves memory. It involves your earliest memories of context, of how a room and how space sounds. It certainly involves your earliest memories of music and musical instruments and the context of music. Whether you're hearing it on earbuds or whether you're hearing it in a concert hall. And I think the way into critical listening is really covered pretty well here. It challenges the quality of paying attention and the ability to focus.
Yeah.
And for young, let me just take a shot at this idea. Yeah, you first, Emiliano.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to stop sharing.
No, I think I was about to ask you what you're going to say, which is, if I'm a student at home right now with tons of time and not a lot of equipment, how can I improve my critical listening skills? If that makes
well, the first thing is you do need kind of a minimum amount of quality equipment. If you don't have good speakers or a good room, I use these earbuds. They're called Etymotic Research, and they're quite good. I also use Odyssey headphones for mixing if I don't have speakers. So your first step is to get a playback chain where you can listen to high quality music. Where they're with this new access to 9624 tracks on Tidal. I really recommend Tidal Master for listening to fairly high quality sound. And the other thing I recommend, and I don't want to pick it up, but I also have an MQA D to A converter. An MQA is a process that does a very detailed method of taking high resolution sound and fitting it on a 4824 pipe. So if you can imagine something that takes 19224 or 9624 and reformats it to flow through a 48 kilohertz 24-bit pipe, and then at the other end to convert it back to 19224. I've heard some amazing records that we did on analog tape that have been put up on Tidal. But I'd start there. I'd start with the best D-Day converter you could get and your best playback. And very often that is earbuds, not AirPods. Not AirPods.
Yeah.
And not Beats. Don't show me your Beats headphones. They're not very good.
Beats are cool. But the audience have a question. Are your earbuds the Etymotic Research ER4PT?
Yes, not PT. I think B.
Are those okay?
Yeah, but they are
B.
ER4s.
Okay,
yeah.
ERP. Okay. So then maybe we can put a link after.
I'd have to look it up. By the way,
Robin is doing that.
Okay, I'm looking up Theodore Adorno, and he's really most quoted as a philosopher. Maintain this culture, mainstream standard. Oppression is created through politics, blah, 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 blah. I think he's brilliant, but I don't know what he would add to listening, so I'd have to look that up. But the person that recommended it, I thank you for introducing him to me.
Juan Carlos Tortello was the guy. But that was very interesting. What you mentioned about good D2A converter, a good in-ear system or playback system, because right now I have the feeling that everyone is at home, so it's great to know how with a few components you can develop a skill that you can bring with you to a recording studio next year when everything is back, hopefully to more of a normal life.
Exactly. And I don't want anyone to think I'm saying that these replace speakers. These do not replace speakers. But if you have to have a good reference and you can't afford good speakers, then this is the next best thing.
Yeah. I don't know if you had any more thoughts that you wanted to develop on what we were talking about. I have a question from the audience. If you want to,
I want to hear questions. Let's have questions.
We have Dave Brex saying, "Hi George, thoughts on mixing with adaptive AI EQ?" artificial learning EQ?
We've been trying for years to better understand automated mixing. It started as automated mixing. In fact, the popular website Lander was grew out of some research from PhDs that we worked with, Brecht-de-Man, and others, and it never really worked, and it still doesn't really work. And I say this with all kindness to my friend Josh Rice and Brecht-de-Man and the guys that have been working on this, Pedro Pestana, and I'm deeply interested in this because there must be something that we can learn about the way we listen and apply it to automatic tools. But right now, adaptive EQ is good for some things. Peter Eastie, before he went to work for Apple, developed an adaptive EQ algorithm that located problems and flattened the response. And that's okay. And it's certainly applicable to artifacts, to modes in a room or weird ringing in an instrument. But that's not all about, that's not what EQ is all about. EQ is about fitting things together often. I mean, it's about many things, but it's certainly also about fitting things together, where you want to understand the timbres of different sources. And boy, I just haven't heard adaptive EQ do that well yet. You're asking a lot of it. You're asking it to have a real intelligence, an emotional intelligence. And I'm not sure AI is good at emotional intelligence just yet.
That actually, we can tie this question to another question from, I think, our common friend, John Crivet, who is here with us.
Hi, John.
In the chat. It says, hi, George. Any current thoughts about machine learning? Which I guess continues this other question.
Well, the most effective thing for me as a mixer and also a designer is what I want to do is use EQ in a piece of music, use EQ, and find that some way to fit that into a machine context, a machine learning context. Well, this is what I do when I hear this. In terms of the way I twist knobs. This is what I do, and that is possible to pour into a machine, pour into an algorithm, and have it respond like I do in that one case. And with enough different cases, enough different examples of what I do, I'm basically going to have a machine that behaves like me. And hopefully is a little nicer than I am. But so the hope is to stay involved with that field, to better understand its best use.
Continuing on machine learning, critical listening, you mentioned about immersive music, Atmos music. Can you tell us a bit your thoughts about immersive audio, immersive music, mixing in formats that are three-dimensional? How that ties with your critical listening? Is that expanded? Is that the same but different?
That's another big subject. Thank you, Emmy. You're hitting all the big subjects. That's really great. I loved learning how to mix 5.1, and it took us some time to do well in our group, in our Meta Alliance group. All of us did 5.1 mixing and had the best hopes that there would be a way to share 5.1 with a broad audience. It didn't happen. And some people lost a lot of money trying to promote it, and it just didn't work. So the modern version of that adds height to our old surround, our old concept of surround, which is either 5.1 or 7.1. DTS put a center surround and called it 6.1. And to that basic structure, immersive adds height and occasionally a lower ring on the floor. The NHK 22.2 system has 3 rings of playback. And, you know, our researchers have shown that that lower ring is significant, the lower ring. And I doubt that any of our audience has, or many in our audience have actually heard this, but it does add something that comes closer to an immersive experience, having that lower ring. But the key is this, is if you can't get it out to the public, it doesn't really, it's not interesting. If you can't play it, if you can't hear it at home, it's not interesting. And it's been very difficult to make that work in a broad range of listeners. So you have sound bars, the sound bar like it seems like everybody's got one. Samsung's got one. Sennheiser's got one. And now we have the Echo Studio, this single speaker that supposedly in the right room fills the room with 3D sound. We have high hopes for it. I'm not sure that it's the highest quality solution, but it's a solution for the public. We have hopes that headphones that
binaural,
beyond binaural, Dolby has an algorithm that takes an immersive mix and down mixes it to give you some feeling of space. Sony has one. RA360 has one that's pretty good. And the idea is to get it out to as many people as possible. What does everybody have? Well, everybody has earbuds. So, man, if we could make these earbuds sound good, that'd really be great.
Yeah.
It doesn't work yet. It doesn't work well yet. It's not compelling. I want to hear music that compels me to feel something. I want to hear music that just blows me away. I want to make music that blows people away.
In that regard, do you feel like immersive audio adds to the experience, or do you think this is just my thoughts, if I might express my thoughts first. I love immersive audio, and I had the luck of basically being in the zone in a studio back when I was in Belgium when I started. That it was kind of one of the ground zeros for immersive audio. But I felt that sometimes the medium forgot the reason behind, which is song, music expressing a feeling. Do you think that we sometimes use technology, let's say, and we can say whatever, as a crutch?
I think when you use technology as a crutch for music, it's the wrong direction. I think that the best music takes advantage of technology. Certainly, Ed Cherney used to say that he thought, I wish I could mimic Ed Cherney. I miss him so much. But he used to say, I just thought it was a miracle that such great music could go through a wire. I mean, what a miracle that this great music can make you feel. So you make you cry, make you laugh, make you give you a sense of yourself, and it goes through a wire. And that is a miracle. But that's technology. And the better the technology, the more
The
detailed we can get, the more detailed we can get in our mixing. And think in terms of space, of loud sounds in the presence of very soft sounds, where if you listen critically to well-recorded music, you'll hear a great depth to the production, a great depth to the space in front of you in stereo recording. And that to me improves with technology. But we're using it to also make MP3s, which are one of the worst things when the bit rate is low enough. One of the worst things I've ever heard. Well, how do we make it more effective? We make it louder. So okay, let's make these MP3s sound big. Let's push more sausage down the skin. Let's just make it as loud as we can. And that's the loudness war. And that has to end.
Yeah.
And we think it has ended with loudness normalization.
That was my feel. I feel that we are reaching the end of that era. What's your thoughts on the quality of music being put out right now?
I have a lot of thoughts. I love Billie Eilish. I love Billie Eilish. I love the Billie Eilish record. My colleagues don't think it. They don't think it should have won a Grammy. I think it should have, because I think it's an amazing job of these two people, Billie Eilish and her brother, paying attention to production. And I'm a huge fan of Bon Iver. I think his new record is stunning. It breaks through assumptions and it transcends technology. It's just brilliant. So, I mean, I think we're making some very good music, and it is modern. We're not talking about just recording classical music. I mean, we can do that very well. We can do that all day long. But making music that reports from the edge of the culture, reports what's happening at the edge of our culture, that interests me deeply. And I think that takes into account technology. That there are these tools that we're learning how to. We're finally learning where autotune is appropriate. We're finally learning how to use autotune 20 years later. And I use autotune reluctantly sometimes, but we're learning how to use it right, I think. Does that make any sense? What was your question anyway?
My question was exactly that. Like, when the whole thing of Billie Eilish and Phineas winning Grammys for Best Engineer, I really love that they won, because it's music and music first and music first and music first. Someone in the comments referred to Bruce Sweden, says, to quote Bruce Sweden, music. It's all about music. Music first. I remember I had a lack of meeting Bruce, I think 4 years ago, and basically I asked him, "Hey Bruce, can you sign your book for me?" And I always remember he says, "Dear Emmy, music first." And
that's great.
And I think that goes back to the fact that like at the end we can argue about they did in the bedroom, but it touches people, so that's the point of it.
Are there questions? Some more questions from our audience?
There's a few more questions. Let me see. There is a question for Martijn Blom. I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Says, what are your thoughts on 384 kilohertz? Is there an end, or just a timestamp of now will be a higher in the future, or is more bit depth more important?
That's a great question, and thanks. It's not something that everybody is going to appreciate, but I have to tell you, I think I've heard some records coming out of Oslo on 2L records, and let me see if I can find a reference.
Morton's label, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And maybe Robbie can put a link to Morton's label on the comments.
Yeah, we want to point to Morten Lundberg.
engineer, producer as well from Oslo, Norway.
And his company, I'm going to chat his company, and he has done some stunning work in high res and brilliantly produced. And he takes personal control of the music and the setup. Very, very often he'll have a very custom setup. He'll move an orchestra around until it is just right for his array of microphones. Is bit depth important? If it's used right, it is. I mean, the truth is, as far as I can see, there's no such thing as higher resolution than 22, 23 bits. There's a noise floor. There's a limit. And what I like about MQA is it takes advantage of that in using the bit resolution that we have to its best use, to a really effective degree. Higher frequency is really tough. I mean, you've got certain people in our industry say that anything beyond 44.1 is unhearable. That's not true. That's just not true. And although the science of it is still evolving, we do know that higher sample rates lead to better localization, especially in the immersive space, especially in the multi-channel space. Better localization. And again, MQA shines because it's able to reproduce 192K works, maybe from analog. And some of them are just staggeringly good. We have stuff on Tidal, and this worries me about Tidal because they didn't have a good year last year, and I worry about them going out of business. But there's some high-res labels where you can listen to high-rate sound, and it's great. You have to have a good D to A converter. You have to have good speakers, and mind you, speakers themselves don't go up much beyond 30K. And you've got to be careful of speakers with built-in DSP that's only 48K. So, that kind of gets in the way. Yeah. I hope that answered your question, Martin. That's a good question.
And just from the chat box, someone is quoting Ed Cherney saying, "No one ever left a recording session dancing to what kind of gear was used." Which
the other thing Ed
Cherney
had so many great things. And somebody asked Ed, how do I make big sounds? And this, I think, came from, you'll help me here, Emmy. This came from Bruce Wedin. Is you got to fill the speakers, George. You got to fill the speakers. Fill the speakers. Yeah. He also said, George, you got to fill the VU meters. Just fill the VU meters. Whatever that meant, I think it inspires me.
Exactly.
I love it. I loved it.
I mean, I have an entire career trying to learn who the heroes and who the people were behind the records I love. And for the audience that might not know, and correct me if I'm wrong, George, but Ed was basically the second or assistant engineer to Bruce for a long time with Thriller for Michael Jackson and so on. That's correct?
Well, you can look it up to verify. I know that he did a bunch of stuff for Bruce Wedin, and probably there was some Michael work in there as well. But I don't have it in front of me, Emmy.
No.
But boy, he did a lot of great work. You know what I love is his old Ohio Players. If anybody remembers the Ohio Players record, he was an engineer on a lot of the old Ohio Players record, and they're just great. I mean, I loved them when I heard them in the 70s. That's how far
Ohio Players.
Sorry?
Sorry, I don't know them.
Screen Freeze. Okay, you're back.
You hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you were talking about the Ohio Players. Is that a band or a group?
That's a group, and they recorded in Chicago, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, no, Ohio Players was a group and very
Yeah.
famous.
Okay,
Going to look it up.
I'll look it up. To continue the talk, and I'm sure we're gonna get tons of more questions with this. You recently, as we mentioned at the beginning of the talk, that you just released a few weeks ago your new plugin equalizer called MDW EQ6 AX for Pro Tools, and I would love you to give us the thought process of why did you have the need or felt the need for these new features, and
Well, you know
and
what?
again.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. I'm going to throw it up on the screen, Emmy.
Okay.
So, after many years of people asking me to do control points, finally we do control points. Um, it's the kind of thing that I felt that you shouldn't have to rely on, that you shouldn't EQ with your eyes, you should EQ with your ears. And when you have to stare at a cursor to listen, you're listening from someplace else in your brain. And I want to remind everybody that you have to EQ from your heart. You have to close your eyes. Well, closing your eyes doesn't work very well with a screen in front of you. And yet, there are ways that you can use a physical work surface. I have a little Avid work surface, and it's pretty good. S3s and S6s are pretty good, where you can close your eyes and turn a knob and hear the sound come back. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say, or to claim, and I hope somebody will argue with me, that idea of an analog console has a lot to do with how you move around on a console. And the knobs don't change definition. When I reach out here to the mids on a vocal track, it's always in the same place, and I can mix from muscle memory. An analog console, for me, had a lot to do with being able to dance on the console, to get around very quickly, to change a bunch of things very quickly, and to get a real sense of this evolving sound. And it's not just about one button on one plugin. And I think what's evolving is better and better work surfaces so that we can reach into a mix better. We can immerse ourselves in the physicality of mix by having these controllers that are more and more useful, in that you can make it so that controls are always in the same place, and more accurate. I mean, some of these faders on early, like the little Roland boxes, the Roland VS boxes, were just so low res that you couldn't really make a move that you could internalize, I think is the best word. So I think that's getting better, that these consoles are getting better. The SSL consoles are pretty good now too.
All right. If you don't mind, we have a few questions about your. Says
Sure.
Costas Antonopoulos says, "Hey George, any news regarding the MDW compressor plugin?"
Is we're ready. I think we're ready to release this. My partner Jim Pace wants to wait until we have a really good idea that people are going to be able to use it. But this is it. It's called the DRC2, and I would invite our listeners to get in touch with me if you'd like to get a demo on it. There you go. Here it is. It's a It's
So that's your chance, everybody.
here. It's a little different than the one I showed in Europe a decade ago, in that we had a really effective what's called a histogram, where you could see the effect of your gain reduction over time. We just haven't done it yet, so we'll eventually have a second version of this. But this is basically the heart of the MDW DRC, and we'd like to get it out there. But it's, I mean, people look at this, they say, "Oh, it's so many knobs. What do these knobs do?" And I say, "Well, you have to listen." They say, "I don't want to listen. Give me a preset." So we're in the process of gathering up a bunch of presets. In the process of gathering up presets to better demonstrate the box. I hope that answers Costas' question. Costas, I invite you to get in touch with me.
Basically, Costas says, "Brilliant, thank you." John Krivitz says, "I would like a demo." Alan Mayer says, "I love to as well." So you will get a few requests of a demo for DRC2.
I hope so.
So
I hope so. That'd be great.
That's great. I remember when we met, you talk about this concept with me about the DRC2, but I would like you to just briefly touch of why did you develop DRC2, or what needs did you feel that had to be covered when you thought about DRC as your dynamic controller, basically?
Okay, well, here's the answer. Is I've been doing this for as long as I can remember. I started working on a dynamics controller in 1972, 1973, and the most intriguing way to proceed was to find something that had a better control section. You know, the classic compressor has a full wave rectifier and a capacitor, and that's the classic control section. Going back to vacuum tubes, going back to earliest compressors for disc cutting and radio stations. And that never cut it for me, especially on vocals. So what I did find is an early dynamics unit that was done by API that Dave Blackmer had developed. Dave Blackmer of DBX. An interesting guy. And when I gave my paper on parametric EQ in 72, he was giving his paper on the DBX system. The DBX system never really worked all that well. The noise reduction system I'm talking about, the compressors, I thought were pretty good. And the way he did RMS detection and signal analysis was brilliant. And also fairly easy to, not cheap, but easy to implement. So I've been working on this for years, is this idea of an RMS compressor and also what's necessary for larger excursions of shorter signals, bursts. You know, we don't have a description. It's not really a peak. Peak can be many different things. It could be a 10 microsecond snap is a peak. You can barely hear it. The SNAT is a digital discontinuity. You can barely hear it. A burst of some 500 milliseconds. What do we call that? Well, it's not like the crack of a snare drum. It's longer than that. So the ear has a way of listening that changes for different types of, I want to call them transients, but I want to call them different types of bursts. Around 200 milliseconds and shorter, the ear hears that differently. The ear hears a 10 millisecond burst differently than a 200 millisecond burst. And you know what? I'm going to see if I have a paper and I can throw it up for you to look at. This shouldn't take too long to find.
Because I do remember that you with GML, you had a hardware unit for dynamics, correct, as well?
Yeah, I did. The 8900. We don't make it anymore. But yeah. Okay, here it is.
But that was kind of the concept of having a DSP detector and analog compressor.
Yeah. Here, let me put this up. No, it started with that. That was the first time I did that. Let me put this up, and I think it'll explain it better. This is the work of a guy named Rand, and this shows how the ear senses loudness. Can you see that, Emmy?
No? I don't see your screen at the moment, George.
You don't see my
screen? Or you send it to me?
No, you should see this on my screen. Let me see.
Now it's
actually, okay, here. Can you see this?
Yeah, it's going.
Yeah.
It just took time.
Okay.
So yes, comparison of loud models, no?
Yeah, and I'm going to do it a different way. I'm going to do it. Hang on, I'm getting there.
Yep, we have all the time in the world. We already so as well.
Oh, you dropped out. Hang on one sec.
For later.
Here's shit. Let me do this like this. Loudness models. Yeah, let me just bring this up. There, can you see that? Comparison of loudness models. This comes from a paper by this guy, but you'll see that that as you see, one scale is the duration of a pulse, and the other scale is the perception of its loudness. And as the pulse gets shorter, the perception is that it's softer. And this should be RMS, but it's not. It's somewhere in between RMS and a cube root of 3. So this idea of a detector with a variable exponent is what I've been working on for years. And you'll see here,
which I assume,
I'm sorry, you dropped out.
I would assume that's kind of CPU. That I would assume that basically that mathematics is very hungry.
It's very hungry. And here's the control. The attack control is really an exponent. That is an exponent. And we have a patent on this, on the way this math is done. But we have a peak section, the peak override. It's a lot like the 8900 override, and a longer, slower detector. And that's basically it. And this fast detector can be very fast. It can create or help create that snap of a snare drum sound that Bill Schnee says it's like capturing that sound of a snare drum hitting an SSL compressor, the Bob Clear Mountain sound, where you open up the attack a little bit and you get a little snap on the front of a snare drum. But that I'm changing subjects here. That's a completely different subject.
It's very everyone is, I'm sure everyone is very happy to hear your thoughts about DRC2. We have a couple of more questions. Would you like to run them by you now?
Yes, please.
Okay, so from Elias Gasaft Garcia Salas says, George, how essential is in a studio to have analog equipment considering the quality of plugin nowadays? What's your opinion on the debate about digital and analog?
I try to stay away from that debate now. I try to stay away because if you love listening to vinyl, and I love listening to vinyl, it's not always convenient. But if you love listening to vinyl, then I'm not going to be very persuasive that digital can be almost as good. But in fact, Morten Lindbergh has demonstrated that it can be approaching that same sense of immersion that you get listening to analog. I have analog equipment. I have a compressor, an analog compressor that I use that just is very rock and roll. If I want to make a rock and roll mix or a rock and roll master, occasionally I'll use an analog compressor. It does what something that mine doesn't do. But I tend to want to use the right tool for the job. And more often, I like the idea that I can take a mix, an automated mix with me in Pro Tools and work on it in New York, work on it in Los Angeles, work on it in Belgium. And to take that mix with you
Spain
in Spain, it's the key to modern work, being able to share a mix with other producers and everybody contributes to this. You can't do that the same on an analog console. And you certainly can't do it unless you carry analog processing with you. But I don't think analog processing is in and of itself better.
I have a question myself. That was a really good answer. I have a question myself in touching this subject for you because I would love to just hear in your, let's say, your mixing setup, in your mixing. I don't know if you use templates or not, but in your day-to-day mixing jobs, what are the, let's say, 5 tools or techniques in the digital domain that you find yourself always using besides MDW EQ and your DRC2 plugin that I'm sure you use it daily? Other tools that from other manufacturers that say, Amy, check this out.
That's a really good question. I'll use Altiverb. Let's see what's on this mix. Actually, I don't have a mix up, but I'll use Altiverb extensively. And I have a library of course, their library of samples, and I have a library of my own samples. I like Altiverb. I like Lexicon PCM 96 plugin. I think that covers pretty much the 2 main reverb sounds. There's some other reverb that's come out. Oh, and also an Eventide 2016. The Eventide 2016 plug is still one of my favorites. And I'll use it a lot for long reverb. A friend of mine named Tony Agnello developed it years ago for Eventide. And Mick Zazowski and I were crazy about the hardware box, but it was so unreliable that you had to own 3 of them for one of them to work. But this the new plug is pretty good. I can show it to you. That's pretty important. What else do I always use? I will almost always use a, I don't have it on this system. Yeah, I do. I'll use Dwayne Wise's frequency sensitive compressor. And it looks like this. And you can, and you can take a, it's basically a parametric EQ with a detector on it. And you can take this, I can't really demonstrate it. Let's turn it on. And I don't know whether you can see
remember
that.
I started using that plugin.
So here it is. You can't hear this, but I've got it on a jazz session I did. And you can pick a frequency, shape it, and have it just compress that frequency. So one of the questions that I often get is, do I use multiband? And the answer is I don't use multiband because I don't think that I want it to change the timbre of the sound. I don't want a multiband compressor to make it loud. I hate things that only make something loud. But I can shape sound with a combination of my EQ and Dwayne Wise's Dyne PEQ. I'll also use sorry.
No. Sorry, continue.
And I'm just thinking about it. But what was your question first, Emmy?
Alan Meyerson says the quartet is amazing from Whole Grain, which as well is the same company, I think, right?
Yep, it is. It is. It turns out Dwayne Wise, Alan, I've told you that Dwayne Wise is our filter guy. He's the guy that came up with this new, here, I'll share my screen again. He and I came up with this new way to do a high Q shelf. This is, I was showing this to Emiliano earlier. It's another way to do a shelf where instead of your traditional shelf would look like this with very smooth transition, and it's always smooth, Q of 0.5. A high Q shelf looks more like this. And it allows, it's a lot more flexible. Imagine if you're able to have a dip right before you do a boost on your low end. And to be able to, I mean, we've done this for ages, Alan. I mean, just speaking as somebody I know who's used equalizers wisely and effectively for years, we maybe do this with a combined, some kind of combined thing, like this would be a shelf. Let's turn the rest of these off. So you'd have a shelf and a peak and a composite curve where I want to bump the low end, but I don't want it to go down too far. That kind of shape, I find myself doing a lot. Well, it's easier, or maybe it's a little clearer or more effective to have that be a composite curve and then to be able to tune this, to be able to dial it in. But Alan, I'll send you a demo of one of these. You can decide for yourself. Does that make any sense, anybody?
And it definitely does. Sorry, because I cut you off. You were expanding on like what the tools that you use or other plugins that you might recommend us.
What else I recommend? I use Autotune. I like Autotune. More and more we're trying to Crivet. Great. I use the heck out of Eventide plugins. I love the H3000 plugin. I use it all over the place. And yeah, Richard Factory and Tony Aniello really identified how to do it well. And they just have a very, very clean approach to doing a chorus. And the other thing about the H3000, if I could just hype them a little bit for a second, let's get rid of all of these. Let's look at an H3000. I wish I told Tony, no, I don't want to do it on that channel. I want to do it on this channel. Multi-channel, pitch shift, H3000. So the cool thing about the H3000 is that you have this little patch bay where you can dial in pitch shifts and delays, have them lock into a tempo, have them be modulated.
We are not.
Sorry? Say it again.
We are not seeing your screen.
Ah, shit.
We don't see your screen.
Okay. My mistake. This is why my longtime colleague Kesri Arai is joined us on the call, and she'll remind me that she's the one that fixes my mistakes. When I make a lot of mistakes, I work fast. I make mistakes quickly and often. And I would suggest students do the same thing. Make your mistakes early and often. So here's the Eventide plug. And I use the heck out of this. Here's, and they're the first ones to come up with a stereo pitch shift that was synchronous, it was locked. And this is important for my work with Ronset, because she'd finish a song and say, it's okay, but I think I want to hear it up a quarter step. This is after we've done a rhythm track. So, I mean, the Eventide pitch shifter was the first and the only one what is this that just came in? Eventide pitch shifter is the only one that stayed synchronous in stereo. You maintain your center. But this is...
Sorry, can you repeat the use of it again?
Okay. One of the uses of the... Here, let me come up with it. Pitch shift. So one of the traditional uses for us in the studio is after we will have done a track, an artist will rethink the key of the track. We'll say, this is okay. It'd be much better if I could try it up a half step. And sometimes this one artist, who I love to death, would say, that's the right key. Let me sing it again to that track. And what it required was for a pitch shifter that had synchronous left and right channels and the ability to retain a center. And generally dual pitch shifts do not do that. I don't even know that this one does, but I've got another one that does, another setup that does. And so I use that a lot. I use it for pitch shift and delay, and I use a lot of these. I use a lot of delay. Use, what else do we have for delays? I use Echo Boy a lot. And I'll use delays to drive other effects. So I'll use a delay, a long delay, going into a reverb way in the back of a sound, in the back of a sound stage. And in Immersive, I use delays all over the place, stereo delays from front to back, from top to bottom, side to side. That's how I get my space in an Immersive mix. Yeah. I think that pretty much says it all. Any other questions?
I was about like 3 minutes over an hour. And says, John Crivet says, "What about this delay is appealing to us?" I don't know what delay maybe he talks about, but if anyone has any questions for George, speak now. I'm gonna just throw my last.
I wonder what did Crivet mean by that?
Exactly. I don't know. That's why I ask again. So Gigi Roefaro has a question. Says, personal question to George. Quite a while you started to develop digital products. If you have to compare your effort and self-satisfaction with analog gear developing, is it digital development rewarding yourself same as developing analog equipment?
That's a really good question. Because when we started developing digital EQ, I mean, I have a very good analog EQ that we built, and we still build it to this day, and we sell it to this day. It's very expensive. Can't make it any cheaper. We set out to build a digital EQ that wasn't a emulation of the analog EQ. We wanted to build the best digital EQ we could. And we had to learn, I had to learn new technology, and we had to learn about digital filters. The digital EQ took a lot longer to build for researching different filter form factors. And we settled on a form factor that I don't think anybody else uses. I haven't ever heard of anybody using this one that we use. And there's very specific reasons that we use this one form factor. And I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will say that it has balanced coefficient sensitivity is the big feature with this filter. And it means that our digital equalizer has lower noise and better resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And I am satisfied developing anything. I love developing a mix. I love developing a product. I love putting it in someone's hands and having them say that it helps.
Yeah.
I love that.
Thank you, George. Let's we have one last question from Alan Meyerson.
Okay.
And he says, can we get away from tech and talk about the art of listening?
Yes.
Do you ever train yourself in listening? I used to have a few records where I taught myself about imaging, depth, panning, visceral impact, etc.
Brilliant point, Alan. Thank you so much. And my training is ongoing. What I'm learning about imaging in the multi-channel, in the immersive multi-channel universe, I'm learning every time I go into the studio about something, some possibilities, or how I can use delays and phase of a signal between two speakers, taking very small delays and widening the sound. I'm still listening, and it takes time. And here's the key: is anybody can do this if you have patience. The problem is when you're given a job and you have to finish it in 3 hours. I'm not very good at that. I'm not a very good engineer for hire. The first immersive mix I did for a fixed figure, and I ended up spending 12 days on it. I ended up spending 12 days, and at some point during the mix, it wasn't working at all, and I tore it down and started from scratch because I had learned something about imaging that I didn't know when I started, and I locked myself into a solution that I couldn't break down. So here's the thing: is continuing to try things. You have to give yourself a chance to do it from scratch. So Crivet says, what's going on in our brains when we hear effects from the H3000 and the old 910? I think these algorithms, especially the pitch shifting things, are better splicing, is that Tony and to a certain extent Richard Factor came up with these algorithms that to this day are the best algorithms around. I mean, there are other people chasing them down, and other people do pitch shifting, but I think Tony's the best. But that answers your question. Back to Alan Meyerson's question. Yeah, Alan, we're all learning all the time. We're learning what's possible all the time, and the question is how much time we can dedicate to listening and to trying new things and experiment. And that's a challenge for you, I know, because you're doing these huge ass projects, and you're on the clock, and you're spending $10,000 a minute on studio time. You don't get a lot of time to experiment. Visceral impact. Visceral impact is what we're all after. We're all after visceral impact. And the only way to tell is to play it to somebody and see if it blows them away. And if it doesn't, go back and fix it.
Try again.
Try it again.
That's great, George. I think with this we will wrap this up and let you go back to your own time. As well, before we leave, where can people reach you at that we can put on the chat box for the DRC demo, for questions, if they want to get in touch with you? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way is through the MDW website. So that's MassenburgDesignWorks.com. And I'll have to ask...
we'll put up the website in the...
I'll have to ask my colleague Kazri how they can get in touch with me through the website. So let me just answer that really quickly.
As well, okay, we just put in the chat box your Massenburg Design Works website. As well, for all the people watching, we were at the beginning of the talk talking about critical listening, and we shared at the top of the chat box a document from George about critical listening that I definitely recommend you to read and study and read again, because, well, that's I think, where it starts, and it's very helpful for any level of knowledge. If you are starting out, if you are a system engineer.
I think that's a really good primer on critical listening. So I would recommend it. Yeah,
check it out. And I thank you, George, for your time, for doing this, for keeping to teach us and helping us in this quest of better visceral impact, better gut feeling in the music.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I thank everybody for their patience and for watching. Alan, I'll be in touch with you, my friend.
I hope to see you soon and hang out soon in a studio with you, George. Take care, my friend. Bye.
I hope it's a pleasure. Thank you so much.